Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Life Science Rundown. This is Nick Capman with the FDA Group. Before we jump into our discussion for today, just a little bit about the FDA Group. We help life science companies in the areas of quality assurance, regulatory affairs, clinical operations, commissioning, qualification, and validation, as well as CMC. We offer three different engagement models, which are consulting, staff augmentation, and full-time employee recruitment. So if you ever find yourself in need, just head over to the FDAgroup.com to check us out and get in touch. So today I'm speaking with Eric Busenburg. Hey, Eric, how you doing?
Great, Nick. Thanks.
Awesome. So today, the topic of the podcast is I have raw materials and or finished goods. However, my space has run out. What do I do? Or it's about to run out, and what do I do? So we're going to be looking at that. Before we jump into it, could you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. I'm Eric Busenburg, president of Euro American Worldwide Logistics, and we provide GMP storage and international shipping to life science manufacturers.
Okay, awesome. So you know a little bit about the topic.
Yeah, a little bit.
Okay, great. All right, well, let's start at the top. So a company has raw materials, finished products, and they're either getting to capacity and know they're going to be there soon, they're maybe even already there. What are the options that are available to them?
Yeah, so it's a common problem, and it's typically a good problem to have for manufacturers and CDMOs. They don't know exactly when their next big PO will come across where they have additional batch runs to manufacture. They can estimate, so they build their infrastructure size based on their estimates, but we all know that can fluctuate. And so it's a typical problem that manufacturers will face when they start to succeed. And as that growth occurs, one of the hurdles that they'll face during that growth phase is the logistics people saying, we're out of space. And so what do? They're faced with two options. They can build a different additional infrastructure, or two, they can outsource to a third party provider like ourselves. So that's what
Okay,
we provide, the second option.
okay, awesome. So let's go through the different options because I think, like most things, in some cases, option one's a good fit. In other cases, option two is a good fit. So some of the factors I assume are quality, price, risk, proximity, time required. So there's a lot that goes into a decision like that. So maybe we'll start off with quality. So if they were to decide to do a build out on themselves versus going to you, what could they expect in terms of the differences, or are there any differences?
Yeah, the biggest difference when it comes to quality is the quality department. So as you can imagine, quality wants everything in-house under their own roof. And we agree. That is the best option. It always is. The unfortunate part is it's not realistic all the time. There are hurdles that you will face if that's the option you choose, and we can get into those. But in keeping it based on quality now, it's quality wants it in house. So that prevents that. Excuse me. That presents a challenge to my company. Is how do we get as close to in house as possible without it actually being in house. So that is
Mhm.
always our goal, and we take that challenge on ourselves. Is what if their materials are in house? What is the difference between outsourcing to a satellite facility like ourselves and keeping it in house to their
Mhm.
their facility? And we're always working with the quality team and the supply chain team to find what hurdles or what where are there where the, where is there any friction,
Mhm.
and any friction points that's what we take as our next resolution that we have to meet.
Mhm.
And throughout the 55 years that we've been in business, we've been addressing these nonstop. And so we've gotten pretty good at keeping them as closely aligned to make ourselves a true extension of their manufacturing facility as possible.
Mhm.
And what we've found is that quality will see it as, yes, this is an acceptable option.
Yeah. Well, as you were talking, I was actually thinking there's probably a third option, and you correct me if I'm wrong, which is somebody decides to do a build out, but in the interim, they need to use a facility like yours. Do you ever see that?
Yeah, we have seen that, and it is a viable option. We've done that with clients of ours that, especially during the pandemic, as you can imagine, it put a stress on the infrastructure, especially in Massachusetts, for example, where the vaccine was being manufactured. It put it, the capacity really shrank, and so there was a greater need for satellite facilities to
Hmm.
support that growth. And so, yes, we did partner with some of those manufacturers so that they can use our facility as a satellite third party materials management facility while they were building additional infrastructure.
Yeah.
Correct.
And because you're in Massachusetts like I am, we know the cost for space is higher than other regions of the country, especially if there's a lot of companies in Cambridge that want to keep it really local. That price per square foot, if that's how it's measured, is going to be pretty high. Um, so since I brought that up, let's talk about price and time. So somebody needs to, they're running out of space and they're trying to decide option A, option B, or option C. If somebody wants to do a build out, and actually I can comment on this. I went to a business summit a few weeks ago and they were talking about office space development or commercial space, which does include warehouse and storage in their figures. And we found that the time to build and the cost to build has gone up. Now, I think people probably assume with the inflationary market that the cost has gone up, so that's probably not a surprise. But what I wouldn't say I found it surprising that the time is taking longer. Um, uh, Primarily because I never really thought about that aspect of commercial construction. But I think we're still dealing with some of the limitations that came from the pandemic in terms of supply chain. So the number of months that it's taking has gone up. So have you seen anything as it pertains to time and cost for expansion projects, maybe compared to things you've seen in the past? How much more time is it taking? How much more is it costing? So on and so forth.
Yeah, it certainly has not come back to normal yet. Pre-pandemic, there's still lead time issues on sourcing a lot of the materials needed to build additional infrastructure. Just to give you one example, backup generators typically would take 1 to 3 months, and they're still out a year. Uh, but in general, the time commitment would be 1 to 3 years minimum, depending on the size of the facility that you're going to build. And so there's a there in itself is a time commitment before you can start the growth phase. So the immediacy is not possible to take on new clients. And if your clients, for example, if a CDMO needs to take on new clients and their clients need immediate batch runs, they don't have the luxury of waiting 1 to 3 years for you to build a different additional infrastructure. So that's just not an option. So you're either not going to be awarded that business, or you're going to look for another option. And that other option, again, would be to outsource to a satellite facility that's ready to go. So it's immediate.
Mm,
Of course, you'd have to go through the quality checks, but it's far shorter runway there, so you
yeah,
can move in immediately and support the growth.
yeah. Another thing that kind of popped in my head in terms of consideration is, and you talked about vaccines, um, and the COVID vaccine, and I think everybody has come to realize that the popularity of the vaccine or the amount of people taking their boosters has dramatically dropped since the first phase of the pandemic, right? Where there were a lot of mandates. Everybody was kind of getting their first two, unless they had J&J, which was one. And then, there were these follow-on boosters that people were taking. And then we've seen the amount of people taking that really drop off. Um, Now, if I were to put myself in those companies' shoes, I might have made this big build out, assuming this was going to keep going, right? Now, and I can't speak to what they did or did not do, but another thing that might be in consideration when determining a build out is what is that level of confidence that if we build out that amount of infrastructure for a raw material or finished product, that the demand isn't going to shorten or lessen. And we also know, especially with new drugs and biologics, there's a limit in terms of how long they can own the rights to the commercializing that product until generic companies can start applying to put those on the market, which obviously, if you've ever looked at a bar graph, once that happens, it goes from up here down to here. Right. So I assume flexibility must be a big point of contention when people are trying to figure out what to do. Have you seen that?
Yes, so it comes down to the risk level. If you're committing to building infrastructure, that's a long-term commitment. So it's not only is it going to is the cost up, especially currently, as you mentioned, and the readily available timeline will be 1 to 3 years minimum. So not only that, but now once you have built that, you are into a long-term commitment because
Hmm.
you have you're taking leverage to build that infrastructure. You're banking on having a steady flow of growth to support that growth that you just the new facility that you just built. So that's under option A. But so how do you mitigate that risk? Well, by outsourcing, your time commitment could be 3 to 5 years with a satellite facility. And so when you have those ebbs and flows of the economy, like you just mentioned, and that we're seeing right now, as things start to exhale, let's say, your time commitment is 3 to 5 years, as opposed to a much longer time commitment if you're putting capital into additional facilities.
Hmm. The other thing, a couple other things popped in my head is it also could be a time consideration. So especially if, people are listening now that are having to deal with this situation, maybe it's not necessarily should I do the expansion, but when, right? Because we've seen interest rates go up on lending. We know that there's still issues with supply chain, and we're in an inflationary, moment in time. So maybe it's not necessarily do I move forward, but when to move forward. And again, outsourcing might be a solution. Um, the other thought that I had, which I wanted to cover with you, is typically with outsourced providers, you're going to pay more at some crossing of time, right? And so, at the FDA group, we outsource certain activities. Um, Fortunately, what we found is the outsourcing that we do are long-term relationships because those vendors and suppliers that we use tend to be subject matter experts in their space because like us at the FDA group, we see lots of different things across a broad spectrum of clients, and we can bring all of that information together and go into a client with that wealth of knowledge, right? And a lot of the vendors and suppliers that we use do the same for us. They work with a lot of different vendors or clients, and they see lots of different things. And I can't tell you how many times they've come to us and proposed solutions that were amazing fits. So, but again, while we still know that at some point there's going to be that cross where outsourcing is going to intersect with the cost of doing it in-house. Do you know how long it takes until that cross section happens?
It would be far enough out where it doesn't come into play for any short-term success that the manufacturer is seeing. It would be beyond the 10-year point, much beyond that. Another reason why is, like you mentioned, you have the expertise at your fingertips. They're already working with you. You're taking that expertise and providing it to your client. That's the same as what we're doing here. The move-in ready availability that we provide to the industry, not only is it the infrastructure, but it's also all of the people working here that are providing that expert care and expert service. So that's another hurdle that we're seeing the industry facing now is the difficulty in finding the right people.
Mm-hmm.
Hiring is always an issue, so that you don't have to go through that. So if you're outsourcing to somebody that already has that in place.
Mm.
So that in itself reduces your costs, reduces your risk. You don't have to train up the new personnel that you're hiring to support that growth. So it's immediate. The expertise is already here. It's just a direct solution.
Mm.
So where do those costs interline? It's 10 plus years at least, and the typical success that we're seeing in the manufacturing, whatever's driving that growth is around the 10-year mark.
Mm.
So it really we don't see it crossing. We don't see the crossing of it being a decision factor.
Mm. The other thing I was thinking as you were talking about hiring is one of the other benefits that I get from some of my outsource suppliers and vendors is all of the HR related challenges that come organically through employees. So, what is the time off policy? Having to deal with fluctuations in staff, um, regular HR complaints that you have to deal with. And so we all need employees and we love employees. At the same time, I have found my quality of life improve when I know my other vendors and suppliers are taking care of all of those issues without me having to get involved. So if there's turnover, I see there's a seamless transition with somebody else. Or if somebody's taking time off, there's seamlessly a plan in place so that I don't have to deal with that either. So I would imagine that outsourcing just from a quality of life perspective, could probably just make things a bit easier in terms of management.
Yeah, it absolutely is 100%. And again, the challenge that we are always trying to hold ourselves to is to become a true extension of the manufacturing facility. And in part, how we do that is with every client of ours, we have a unique quality agreement in place that's written by both ourselves and the manufacturer. And the point of that is to make sure that every process of theirs is being followed exactly at our facility.
Mhm.
So one of the questions that comes up is, what about, can we see your SOPs and your processes? We define those together. So of course we have our own list of processes and procedures. We share those with each client, and then we define together based on their processes So that's how we get through that quality agreement. That's how we get to that seamless extension.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. Um, what about proximity? So, you're in Worcester, um, and I imagine for certain materials and products, um, proximity is a bigger issue than other issue, or than other, or proximity could be a bigger issue depending on what that material and product is. Other cases, it's not. So I assume, in terms of transportation, that must fluctuate depending on, do we need a controlled temperature unit to transport it, or is it generally a stable product? So can you comment on that?
Yeah, proximity is certainly one of the key factors. What we find is the appetite that quality has is 1 hour.
Mm-hmm.
1 hour, they want to be able to see, touch, feel their products and their materials. And we are based, like you said, in Worcester, which is centrally located. We are based intentionally centrally located. That puts us within 1 hour of every manufacturer in Massachusetts.
Mm-hmm.
And so, how do we get it to them and back? How do we shuttle back and forth? We have our own fleet of temperature controlled vehicles. They're validated. We get them approved through each client, of course. And the guarantee that we have is that 24 hours, 7 days a week, we will get those materials to you same day, guaranteed.
Oh.
So that removes one of the risks. So of course, again, if their manufacturing floor needs materials, if it's in house, they can go to the warehouse and get those materials. We need to get ourselves as close to that as possible. The only way we can do that is to guarantee same day the delivery.
Mm-hmm.
And it's 24/7. So we have had clients call us at 2 in the morning, and we have processes in place here, who to call, who's getting it. Our drivers are readily available. The equipment is readily available, and we get it there immediately. So it takes away the what ifs.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. Now, as I was thinking about the different options, build out versus outsourcing, my mind started to shift toward, okay, let's say, I'm a manufacturer and I say, you know what? It's going to take me 10 years until that intersection happens. By that time, generics are coming on the market. I don't want to have to deal with the risk of construction costs going over. I don't want to have to deal with the HR challenges in terms of bringing employees in, keeping them happy. I'm also, worried about flexibility in terms of demand going up and down. So there's a lot of things kind of coming into play. Let's say I made my decision. I say, you know what? I really like the outsource model. I think that's what I'm going to do. How do I pick the right facility for me? What are some of the things that I should be looking into when I say, do I want to go, to a place like Worcester where you're located, or maybe there's another warehouse, and, what are some of those factors and considerations that come into play?
Certainly, proximity, as you mentioned, we covered that. That's primarily the biggest one. We need to make sure that the materials and the products can get to where they need to be within that 1 hour time frame. So proximity is huge. Uh, Beyond that, size matters. So if you're dealing with a big box store, and there are some of them out there, the problem there is who's handling your materials and who are you to them. And the bigger they are, the smaller you are to them. That introduces some risk because you are dealing with junior level people. Typically, when you get to that size, you're a number, and your issues are not the only issues they're seeing. So size matters. You're American. My company is the we're a small to medium sized business. In that, what we're able to do is provide a more attentive care to each one of our clients. And our clients, when they're talking, they have direct access with the high level experts at our company.
Mm.
One of your main point of contacts, for example, is the customs broker. If you're dealing with imports, if you're importing materials into the US, you're dealing with the vice president of international logistics. You're dealing with the quality manager when you need a quality issue. You have direct contact with each of them. And so the immediacy and that direct communication is a quality assurance that life science manufacturers need.
Mm.
And so that's a big piece of it. So proximity, the direct access to experts, and then of course, what are the facilities? I would imagine that all the GMPs would be covered everywhere. But of course, that's something that we pride ourselves in as well. We just did a 20,000 square foot expansion here, state of the art, fully validated. And again, that's to support the growth that we're seeing in the area. And what we do to stay ahead of that is that we don't reach capacity. So as we're nearing capacity, we that's when we grow.
Mm.
So that we're always staying readily available for the growth of the industry.
Mm.
So now the manufacturers don't have to worry about the timeline. When they need that additional space, we'll have that additional space readily available for them.
Yeah, that's great. And that was a really good point that you made because I've seen it many times, but yet I forgot about it in this particular context, which is if you're a small fish in a big pond, that usually equates to the level of attention and detail you're going to receive and what team members you get paired with. So being that you're a small to medium sized business, you might be a good fit for those companies that aren't in the top 25, that, they are the big fishes. So they're going to get the attention no matter where they go. Um, but for those small fishes that you were talking about, if they were to go to one of the, bigger box stores, as you referred to them as, and they were a small fish in a big pond, what are some of the challenges that you think that they would experience there that they wouldn't experience with a company like yourself?
Well, we see it all the time, and it's a typical uh, point that we hear from our clients when we're asking them what's driving them to us as opposed to where they're coming from. And it's exactly that. It's who are you working with? Who is handling your shipments? Who are handling your materials in house? And who has the authority to make decisions when a decision is needed to be made? And what is their expertise behind that decision?
Mm-hmm.
And so when you're dealing with a larger company, the path that it takes to get to the correct person that has that expertise and the authority to make decisions sometimes can be days, if not weeks, to get their attention
Mm.
because they have to go through the protocol.
Mm.
And that protocol typically won't be in the same office. So the lines of communication won't be in the same office. Sometimes they're in different states, and that takes time. And they don't have a vested interest in each one of those clients and each one of those materials and each one of those shipments. When you're working with us, every single piece of material, every single finished product, and every single shipment matters to us. We have a vested interest in your success, and you have direct lines of communication with the experts who can make those, that do have the authority to make the decisions that need to be made at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so we see it frequently, and that is a major difference that we see, and that's really the only way to become a true extension of the facility is you have to have that. We become a part of your supply chain.
Mm.
We become a part of your supply chain team. We're on first name basis. We have the cell phones of each other. We are part of your team. So that's the only way to get to that true extension.
Yep. Awesome. Well, I think this has been really good information in terms of when companies are reaching capacity, at capacity. Should I do a build out? Shouldn't I do a build out? What should I take into consideration? Maybe it's only build out, maybe it's only outsourcing, maybe it's a combination of the two. So definitely lots of things to consider. Um, so I really appreciate you taking some time. What would you like to leave the audience with before we close? And just in case people want to find you and contact you, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, the best way is to reach out online. It's eawlogistics.com, eawlogistics.com. And from there, they can be directed down the correct path to start up the communications. Again, it's a typical issue that we're seeing in the life science industry. Massachusetts has done a great job to entice these companies come here. Euro American has taken it upon ourselves to make sure that we're a part of that support structure that's needed to support the growth of the life science manufacturers here in Massachusetts as they succeed. And this goes all the way back to the Patrick Murray administration when 2008 they passed the $1 billion bill that put money towards the R&D and infrastructure here in Massachusetts and tax incentives. And they've done a great job since. And after that, the Baker Polito administration, they supported as well. They continued it. And now Governor Healy is doing it as well. And she's proposed a $2 billion continuance of the same. So Massachusetts is here to stay. We are the hub. The biggest challenge now is we need the right amount of support services to make sure that we hit critical mass. And the only way to do that is we have to have supporting systems. Euro American is one of those supporting systems. So as these manufacturers see growth and success, when they're faced with the two options of building themselves or outsourcing to a satellite facility, that they give us a consideration. Yeah, we think it's a good option.
Okay, awesome. Well, Eric, I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with me. And for everybody listening, as always, if you find conversations like this valuable, please share it with a colleague or your professional network. If you haven't already, subscribe to get updates of new episodes at thefdagroup.com/podcast and follow the FDA Group on LinkedIn. If you'd like to connect about project or resource needs, head over to thefdagroup.com to get in touch, or feel free to connect with me personally on LinkedIn. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see y'all next time.